From the outside, Harold Henthorn and his wife Toni appeared to have the perfect marriage. Toni was a successful ophthalmologist, and Harold enjoyed talking about his work as a fundraiser for non-profit organizations such as churches. They moved to Denver, Colorado shortly after their wedding in 2000 to enjoy the mountain vistas, and they would welcome a daughter in 2005. However, this perfect life would all change in 2012 after Toni would fall to her death while hiking the Rocky Mountain National Park. Detectives would realize that Harold's version of events wasn't quite adding up after discovering a strange map in his car. Furthermore, detectives discovered that Harold Henthorn's first wife, Lynn, died in strange circumstances in 1995. It would eventually become all too clear as to why Harold Henthorn would be labelled as the Black Widower. Hello, fellow weirdos. Welcome to this week's bonus episode of Horror House. It is Dom. Please take this as your reminder that you are a bloody lovely human being. You are a beautiful human. You are doing amazing things and you are smashing life. But also, I want to thank you, as always, for the support that you give our show. Whether you're a long-time listener, whether this is the first time you have given our podcast a chance, we thank you all the same. We genuinely couldn't do this without you. So, thank you for the support. Thank you for tuning in every week. Thank you for following us on Instagram or your podcast app that you listen to us on, or subscribing to the YouTube channel, or liking, the videos on YouTube, whatever it may be. Thank you. It genuinely means the world. And we are forever grateful for it. So for this bonus episode, it's gonna just be me. Amy, bless her, is swamped with work. That's what she said. Really, she doesn't want to record for you people. Those were her exact words. I'm joking. She is swamped, bless her. So I said that I would take the reins for this solo episode. We will be recording together tomorrow, so Friday's episode will be both of us, and it's a very current case. I shall leave it at that, but it's a very current case. It's been in the news. Hopefully that hasn't put you off, and hopefully you're going to stick around regardless, because today's episode is about Harold Henthorn, a next level piece of shit. He is an absolute scumbag, and you will see why as we go through this episode, why Harold Henthorn is just the worst. With that being said, without further ado, let's get into today's bonus episode about the Black Widower, Harold Henthorn. So Toni and Harold Henthorn would meet online in 1999 and were smitten quickly, marrying 9 months later. Toni was a successful eye surgeon, but all she wanted was to be in a loving marriage and have a family that she can call her own. When she met Harold, her hopes seemed to come true. Harold introduced himself as a wealthy businessman who raised funds for schools and churches. When they met, Harold encouraged Toni to relocate from Jackson, Mississippi to Denver, Colorado. Toni found it difficult to leave her friends and her family behind, but she was excited to begin a new life with her spouse. She gave birth to their daughter Haley in 2005, completing their family. Toni had gotten all that she had desired. It's, happy life, happy marriage. She's got a kid. It's all gravy for Toni and Harold. It's all gravy. That's not going to change. That's not going to go wrong. On the 29th of September, 2012, Toni and Harold would go on a hike at the Rocky Mountain National Park. They were celebrating their 12th wedding anniversary. Interesting way to spend your anniversary. I don't know if hiking is the way that I would look at spending a wedding anniversary. Um, there are many things that I would rather do than hike, to be perfectly honest. If I can avoid exercise in general, I normally do. But yeah, hiking for an anniversary is an interesting way to spend it. But each to their own. They might really like hiking. So that might be something that they both enjoy, and maybe they got some very nice views. But yeah, hiking is an interesting way to spend your anniversary. Definitely not how I would want to spend mine. There are other ways. I'll leave it at that. um, that was really cringe. I'm so sorry. Um, everyone's just clicked off the video. I'm talking into the void now. Um, so the pair would begin their walk, and at about 3:30 p.m., they would leave the trail, and they would have lunch on top of a picturesque cliff. At 4:45 p.m., after continuing off route, they discovered a cliff below their lunch site. Notice that I've said cliff a few times now. Ominous? Maybe. Well, Toni would fall from that same steep cliff less than half an hour later, plummeting 130 feet to the ground. When Harold discovered his wife had fallen 130 feet, he would quickly dial 911. Well, I say that. Maybe quickly wasn't the right word, to be honest. And that's because the 911 call was placed at 5:44, and Toni had fallen 45 minutes before this. Um, you know, because who wouldn't wait 45 minutes after seeing their wife plummet off a cliff to call 911? He said it took him 15 minutes to get to her and another 30 minutes to examine and move her. While on the phone to 911, Harold provided their location near the mountain's crest. He informed the operator that Toni's breathing was labored and that she had suffered a head injury. Falling 130 feet off a cliff would do that. Also, it took him half an hour to move her. That seems an awfully long time. The 15 minutes to get to her, I can kind of see. But half an hour to move her? Like, how long did it take for him to examine her before that it just doesn't add up, does it? It just doesn't add up. Something's fishy with old Henthorn. Telling you. Harold would speak to another operator and told them that he had lit a fire and Toni's breathing had become more shallow. Harold informed the operator that he had attempted chest compressions, and she instructed him on how to do them properly. Harold would dial 911 yet again and inquired whether assistance was on its way. Around 8 p.m., an EMT ranger did arrive, and Toni would be examined, but unfortunately, rather unsurprisingly, by this point, it was too late. Harold would be questioned by the police about the circumstances surrounding Toni's death. He would tell investigators that he did not witness Toni fall, but was reading text messages when he observed what he described as a blur. But old fishy Harold couldn't quite keep his story consistent. Harold would tell people that Toni had gotten too close to the edge. He also told another person that Toni was attempting to capture photographs when she slipped Um, when Tony's parents, Bob and Yvonne Bertolet, were informed that Tony had died in a tragic accident, Bob would simply respond, quote, "He pushed her." While it appeared that Tony's death was an accident at first, Tony's parents stated that they had been concerned about her for quite some time. When the couple moved, she lost her confidence, and Harold had taken control of her life. Something wasn't right, and Yvonne needed to talk to Tony about it. However, she usually had the same response when she brought up Harold's employment, the couple's lack of money, or his need to control every aspect of her life. Quote, "If you do that, I'll suffer the consequences." Harold doesn't sound like the loving husband that he made himself out to be. Or just the good person in general, the one who ran non-profit organizations and, was involved in churches and hospitals and all that jazz. Doesn't quite sound like the real Harold Henthorn, does it? And there would be an incident that would be a sign of things to come. Harold had a cabin west of Denver, and they would both spend a lot of time there. On one occasion, when Haley was sleeping, Harold requested Tony assist him in clearing debris. Um, as Tony walked beneath the porch, a heavy beam would fall off and hit her neck, fracturing her vertebrae. Harold would explain that this was due to a large piece of lumber falling off the porch. Falling off the porch, he says. Hmm. Um, the police would soon uncover some troubling details when investigating Tony's death. There were several discrepancies in what Harold told others about the hike, the region, and what happened that day. Harold and Tony had originally planned to trek the Bear Lake Trail, according to a ranger. This would have been a good choice for Tony due to having 3 separate knee surgeries. However, Harold, being the caring, loving husband that he was, informed the ranger that they had opted to take the Deer Mountain Trail instead. The Deer Mountain Trek is a 3-mile journey that climbs 1,200 feet from the trailhead to the top of to the top of 10,000 of its 10,200 feet at its summit. That's considerably less ideal for Tony and her knees. Yeah, someone who's had 3 separate knee surgeries is probably going to struggle with that one. Harold informed the ranger that he was unfamiliar with the area and had only visited it once. However, authorities would discover through his phone records that he had visited 8 or 9 times in the 6 weeks preceding that day. Furthermore, he was familiar with the area and the treacherous cliff from which Tony had fallen. Not looking good for you, is it, Harold? Detectives also uncovered a suspicious map in Harold Henthorn's truck just days after Tony's death. It was a map of the Rocky Mountain National Park with the Deer Mountain path highlighted in pink, which Harold and Tony had hiked on that fateful day. This didn't seem too strange on its own. Perhaps Harold had merely marked the track that he had chosen to walk. Harold, on the other hand, had not just underlined the route. There was also a big fat X scrawled near the exact spot where Tony had died, which makes this map far, far less innocent than it maybe appeared at first. Unsurprisingly, Harold was apparently at a loss for words when investigators approached him with the map. He then claimed that it wasn't for the anniversary trip, but a map he'd prepared for his nephew. However, the police were unconvinced by Harold Henthorn's story. I think we all are, Harold. I know that you're not watching this, um, but I think we all are a bit unconvinced by your story. Um, Harold's 911 call was also a cause for concern. When the operator attempted to assist him with CPR, he told her that he couldn't speak for long because his phone battery was low. Despite this, he apparently had a, a Nokia 3210, which had just infinite battery life. Because he would make a further 22 phone calls and send or receive a further 98 text messages. But his battery's low. He couldn't talk for long. I mean, these must have been some very short phone calls. Like, these 22 phone calls were literally like 30 seconds long. Needed to conserve that battery. Furthermore, Harold had taken out um, life insurance policies on Toni, according to the police. He had also made himself the beneficiary of a life insurance policy that originally had his daughter as the beneficiary. And the police would soon discover that this was not the first time Harold was a beneficiary of a life insurance policy involving a spouse. But before we get into that old chestnut, that story, I think it's time for a quick break while we gather our thoughts about Harold Henthorn. Um, so grab a drink, grab a bite to eat, grab a snack, whatever it is you want to do. Have some you time. I'm not judging. I'm not judging. And I will see you back here in just a few minutes. Welcome back, everybody, to the second part of today's bonus episode about our good friend Harold Henthorn, the caring husband, the good man. um, so it's, I mean, I think everyone knows that he kind of killed his second wife. He kind of killed Toni, but there was also some suspiciousness surrounding the surrounding his previous wife, Lynn. So let's talk about it, shall we? Let's talk about Harold and Lynn. So Harold met his first wife, Lynn, in college, and the two of them would hit it off straight away. They appeared to be very happy together. So friends and family were overjoyed when the couple would choose to marry. Harold and Lynn would settle into a quiet life with nothing out of the norm. They were able to build a life in Colorado, and the couple were well liked in their community. People were sure that the marriage of Lynn and Harold would withstand the test of time. However, this would not be the case. Dun dun dun. The death of Lynn Henthorn came as a shock to many, and a big part of why was the sudden and the quite bizarre nature of it. On the 6th of May 1995, Harold and Lynn decided to take a drive down an almost desolate roadway in Sedalia? Sedalia? If Courtney from Nick of Crime podcast is listening and I've absolutely butchered that, I'm very sorry. She is from Colorado, so I've probably got that completely wrong. Sorry if I have. The highway they chose had little traffic, and the two enjoyed the comfortable silence as they drove. Alarm bells are ringing quite loudly. I mean, I I enjoy a comfortable. I'm quite comfortable sitting in a room with other people in silence. Like, I'm quite comfortable with just sitting there and not talking. I don't find that uncomfortable. I know other people do. I know people that, if they're sitting in a room with a few other people and nobody's talking, it's only a matter of time before they have to say something because they are so uncomfortable. That's not me. I'm quite happy to sit there and not say anything, and it's not uncomfortable to me. But driving down a empty highway in the dark, in silence, ooh, even for me, I think that would you know alarm bells would be ringing. During the trip, the two would notice something was wrong with their car, and Harold would get out to inspect the damage. He would put the vehicle on a set of car jacks after determining that it was a problematic tyre. Um, Meanwhile, Lynn spotted a lug nut laying beneath the car and crawled underneath to retrieve it. Unfortunately, that's when the jacks would give way and the car slammed down onto the woman, uh, crushing her. When the authorities questioned Harold, he was unable to fully explain why the jacks suddenly buckled. Furthermore, the multiple statements he told police, rather unsurprisingly, contradicted one another. Consistency is not his strong point when it comes to his stories. You need to be consistent with your stories, Harold. They need to they need to match. It's not going to do you much good if you're contradicting all of your stories. He informed one officer that they were going east that night and another that they were actually going west. In one story he mentioned a restaurant where they had stopped for dinner before Lynn's death. But yet in another, he said they were on their way to the restaurant. Um, Unfortunately, nobody asked the actual restaurant if Harold or Lynn had dined there that night. A partial shoe print was also discovered on their car's tire, the same one that Lynn was in the process of changing. Um, at the time, the print was never checked um, to Harold's shoes to see if the print matched. I mean, it's a little bit suspicious. There just so happens to be a boot mark on the tire um, that 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 just so happened to be the one that Lynn was changing. It's a bit fishy. It's a bit fishy. However, the placement of the shoe print was such that it would have been consistent with, I don't know, someone say kicking the car. Um, and obviously, a kick to the car would have likely caused it to fall down on top of Lynn. Um, but Harold wouldn't kick the jacks, or well, not kick the jacks. He didn't kick the jacks. Harold wouldn't kick the tire, which meant that the jacks buckled, which meant that the car fell off. Harold wouldn't do that. He's a good husband. He's a loving husband. He would never consider it. Well, um, Harold had purchased a big life insurance policy on Lynn prior to her death. He told police he was going to get $300,000, but if they had checked this independently, they would have realized that he was going to get twice that amount. This was based on a policy change made by Harold shortly before Lynn's death, um, in which he revised it to provide double compensation if Lynn just so happened to die in, I don't know, a freak accident, perhaps. A woman named Patricia Montoya was mentioned in the police file. Patricia informed the police that she was driving home with her family at around 10 p.m. When Harold flagged them down for help. They looked for a phone to call 911, but couldn't find them, so they dragged Lynn out from beneath the car. Harold yelled at them not to touch her. He was also opposed to them performing CPR, and he also refused to hand over his coat so that it could be kept used to keep Lynn warm. Understandably, this was all pretty suspicious for Patricia. I mean, pretty suspicious for everybody. Um, you know, Harold's wife has just been slammed by a car that she was laying underneath. And you would think that Harold, being the loving husband, would want CPR to be attempted on his wife, or would want her to be dragged out from under the car so they could perform CPR. But maybe if he's going to get $600,000 from her accidental death that he had nothing to do with because it was a freak accident. But yeah, I can obviously see why he didn't want CPR performed. He was going to get bag, so he didn't want his wife being saved. Harold was like that. I'm going to be out 600 grand, 600,000. Like this. Oh, Harold. Um, Lynn would be airlifted to a nearby hospital, but unfortunately, she would pass away during the surgery. Lynn's death would be ruled as accidental, and no charges were filed against Harold in connection with her passing. Make of that what you will. I suppose they didn't have any hard evidence that linked him to that. It was sort of circumstantial. It was a partial print on a tire which may have matched his shoe, but they didn't test that. Like, and there were no witnesses to see him, maybe kicking the tire. It. I can see why he wasn't, like, no charges were filed against him, but yeah, it's frustrating because I suppose all signs point to Harold being the one responsible. He was going to get a big payout if she died accidentally. So, however, when it comes to Tony's death, Harold Henthorn wouldn't be so lucky. And that's because, in connection with her death, Harold would be charged with first degree murder. Prosecutors concluded that he pushed Toni off the cliff with premeditation and malice afterthought. They maintained that Harold planned her murder, and the map with an X placed on the spot where Toni fell was introduced into evidence to establish this to the jury. They also heard facts from the phone records, which showed Harold visiting the park several times in the weeks preceding Tony's death. The medical examiner also discovered no evidence of abrasions, contusions, or anterior rib fractures, which are sometimes linked with CPR. In fact, there was actually zero indication that any CPR had been attempted on Toni at all. Um, the jury would hear that Toni received a neck injury in May 2011 when she was struck in the back of the neck and upper back with a large wooden beam. It happened much like the incident with Lynn and when Toni was pushed off the cliff in a distant and secluded location, and the version of events that Harold gave others was inconsistent. He would inform the paramedics that he threw the beam, but then told a doctor that it had fallen from the deck. However, Harold informed a friend that he dropped it on Toni as he slid off a ladder that she was holding. The prosecution would also claim that Harold had a reason for murdering his wife, and that reason was life insurance. Harold had three $1.5 million life insurance policies on Toni, as well as a $205,000 annuity. And because of Toni's death, he would stand to gain more than $4.7 million. Wow. that's so much money. Wow, that's a hell of a motive, right? Jesus Christ. If he's gonna be $4.7 million richer by offing his wife, yeah, that's all the motivation he needs, right? Make sure your spouse does not have life insurance policies on you, people. and check that, because I don't want to put ideas out there, but make sure that there are no life insurance policies out on you, specifically from your spouse. Just make sure. The defense did not call any witnesses to the stand, instead relying on the prosecution's failure to prove their case. And it would be an unwise decision, because that would prove to be their undoing. After 10.5 hours of deliberation, the jury would find Harold Henthorn guilty of murder and sentence him to life behind bars. Harold would proclaim his innocence just before being sentenced, claiming, quote, "Toni was a remarkable woman. I loved her with all of my heart. I did not kill Toni or anybody else." End quote. And that is the case of Black Widower Harold Henthorn. Loving husband, good guy, no reason to kill his spouses whatsoever. Yeah. I mean, let's be honest, he probably did kill Lynn. I think all the signs point to him offing Lynn. Yes, the life insurance payout for Lynn wasn't what it wasn't the 4.7 million that he had, that he was set to gain from Toni's insurance policies, but still $600,000. That's a lot of money. So yeah, I think all things point to him offing Lynn. And as far as Toni, I mean, there's evidence out the fucking wazoo. Wazoo? Who the fuck says that? Evidence out the ass, for him killing Toni. The map, the multiple visits to the location before their hike, the half an hour, or the 45 minutes it took for him to call 911 after she fell. No signs of CPR being performed. There's a lot that points to him being the one who did that. But of course he's going to deny it. We come across it so often. Serial killers or people that kill, more often than not, they're going to say that it wasn't them. They had nothing to do with it. Oh, I miss my wife so much. Why would I murder her? She was the light of my life. And it's like, no, all the evidence points to you, you fucking dick. But yeah, Harold Henthorn is just a bit of a bellend, a bit of a dickhead. So yes, that is the case of Harold Henthorn. Thank you for listening to this week's bonus episode. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully I still made it fun. And it was still an enjoyable listen, even though it's just me. I still hope you liked it. If you enjoy what we do here at Horror House, please support us. There are many ways that you can do that. You can follow us on Instagram at horrorhouse_pod. You can follow us on your podcast app of choice. You can leave us a rating on Spotify. You can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please do. We want to grow the YouTube channel. We've got an awesome little community over there. So, come be part of it. So those are some ways that you can support us for free. If you want to support us financially, there is the Buy Me a Coffee link that you can go to. If you want to get us some coffees, we are struggling content creators, forever struggling content creators. So if you want to throw us a coffee or two, then we will be very thankful. Amy loves coffee, so she would be over the moon. And it would be helpful, for us to continue what we do. So all that's left to say from me, my friends, is until next time, as always, stay spooky. Ooh.